Cascade by the poet Camille T. Dungy. This is prescribed as the third chapter of your Ecoscapes text. The third chapter title is Food Resources and Food Chain. So this poem comes under that chapter. So first, let's have a look at the poet Camille T. Dungy. She is an accomplished American poet, essayist, and editor known for her distinctive style, writing, and her insightful observations on nature, race, and the environment. Her poems have an eco-poetic focus. That means her poems deal with themes of environmental justice, climate change, and the beauty of nature. She is not only a writer, but she actively engages in environmental protection or environmental activism. She has worked to raise awareness about environmental issues and promote sustainable practices. She has received many awards and honors for her poetry and essays, including the American Book Award and the Northern California Book Award. Apart from the theme of environmentalism, she often writes about her personal experiences and identity as a black woman. She also addresses issues of race, history, and the difficulties of living in a world as a person of color. She has written and published several works, and a few of her major works include Trophic Cascade, that was the collection of poetry published in the year 2017, and the poem prescribed for you is the first poem of this collection with the same name. Another important collection is What to Eat, What to Drink, What to Leave for Poison. So, born in 1972, she is presently Professor of English, Colorado State University. So, that is a brief bio of our poet, Camille T. Dungy. Next, let us look at the title of the poem, Trophic Cascade. The term Trophic Cascade was coined by an American zoologist, Robert Payne, in the year 1980. And the word trophic relates to how organisms get their food or nourishment in an ecosystem. That means it's about who eats whom in the food chain or food web. And cascade simply means to a process or series of events where one thing leads to another. It is like a chain reaction where a change or action in one part sets off a chain of reactions that affects other connected parts. And you know, the term cascade is often used in the context of ecology, and in that it represents the effect of changes in one species. Okay, changes in one species, be it the number of species that affect other species in the food chain or food web. Okay, so when it comes to cascade, it represents a change in one species that will affect the other species in that ecosystem or in that food chain or food web. So now we need to know what is food chain and food web. Food chain is simply a connected chain of food in nature. That means in food chain, one organism becomes the food of another. So a food chain shows us who eats whom in nature. And it starts with plants, okay, which are the first level. And they are called the producers. The plants are the first level and they are called the producers. Plants make their food from sunlight. Okay, and then come the herbivores. They eat herbs like rabbits, deer, etc., who eat the plants. So they are the second level and they are called primary consumers. Okay, and next there are carnivores. And what does the carnivores eat? The carnivores eat the herbivores. They are the third level, called secondary consumers. For example, the rabbit or the deer will be eaten by a wolf or a fox. And sometimes there can be a fourth level called the tertiary consumers. And these are animals that eat the carnivores, like the lion or the vulture, etc. They will kill the fox or the wolf and eat it. So the food chain goes like this. Plants, they are the producers. Next, herbivores, they are the primary consumers. Third, carnivores, they are the secondary consumers. And fourth, tertiary consumers, and that is they eat the the carnivores. So these are the levels of the food chain, and it shows how all living things are connected in nature. And remember, these tertiary consumers are sometimes called the predators. They are the ones who eat these carnivores. And next, what is a food web? Several interconnected food chains form a food web. A food web is similar to a food chain, but the food web is comparatively larger than a food chain. For example, a single organism may be consumed by many predators, okay, or it will be consumed by several other organisms. So that is a food web. So now, with all this, let's try to explain trophic cascade. So trophic cascade is a chain reaction that happens when there is a big change in one part of a food chain or food web. Okay, there will be a big change in one part of a food web or food chain, and this big change can affect many other plants and animals in the ecosystem, and all together it will create a ripple effect or a chain reaction throughout the entire environment. So this trophic cascade, it also shows how everything in nature is connected, and how one or a change in one species can affect others. So this is what this poem is all about, that a change in one part of the food chain or food web can affect the entire ecosystem. And there are several examples of trophic cascades in different ecosystems. And this poem deals with one such example that happened, or a change or a trophic cascade that happened in the ecosystem of Yellowstone National Park. The Yellowstone National Park is one of the most famous and oldest national parks in the world, and it is mostly located in the US. This national park was established in 1872. This park was the first national park in America and was established in 1872. At first, there was a huge diversity of animals and plants in that park, and there was no sort of restriction or protection in the park regarding the wildlife. Anybody could go inside the forest area and can hunt and kill any animal. There were no sort of any restrictions. So in the year 1883, that means after a few years after the establishment of this park, a few restrictions were implemented. And those restrictions included not to hunt or kill certain animals, for example, deer. But this restriction did not cover the wolves. Anybody could kill or hunt the wolves. No restrictions were made regarding the wolves. So what happened? People hunted down these wolves because these wolves attacked the neighboring villages and their livestock and their domestic animals. So the villagers, the people around the forest, they hunted the wolves. And by the year 1920, we see that the wolf population in that national park became extinct. Extinct means no longer in existence. Vamshanasham Neritu. Wolves in Vamshanasham Neritu. By the year 1920, there were no wolves in the national park. അതിന് കാരണം ഈ വുൾഫ്സ് എപ്പോഴും ഇങ്ങനെ ഒരു കൂട്ടമായിട്ടാണ് നടക്കുന്നത്, ഒരു പാക്കായിട്ടാണ് നടക്കുന്നത്. അവർക്ക് ഒറ്റയ്ക്ക് സർവൈവ് ചെയ്യാൻ ബുദ്ധിമുട്ടാണ്. അപ്പോൾ ഈ നാട്ടുകാരിറങ്ങി ഭയങ്കരമായിട്ട് ഇവരെല്ലാം ഹണ്ട് ചെയ്ത് തീർന്നപ്പോൾ വളരെ കുറച്ച് വുൾഫ്സ് മാത്രമാണ് പിന്നെ റിമെയിൻ ചെയ്തത്. അവർ ഈ പറഞ്ഞ അവരുടെ പാക്ക് നഷ്ടപ്പെട്ടപ്പോൾ അവർ ചത്തുപോയി. They died very soon. So as a result of all this, what happened? Wolves became extinct in Yellowstone National Park. അപ്പോൾ ഒരു സ്പീഷീസ് തന്നെ അവിടെ ഇല്ലാതായി. അതായത് ഫുഡ് ചെയിനിൻ്റെ ഒരു പാർട്ട് അവിടെ ഇല്ലാതായി. ദാറ്റ് ഈസ് ദറ്റ് ബിഗ് ചേഞ്ച്. ഓക്കെ, those secondary consumers, they came to a level of no existence. Then what happened? Without wolves, the number of deer in the Yellowstone National Park, their population increased by leaps and bounds. There was a tremendous increase in the deer population of that national park because there was nobody to eat it up. There was nobody to kill it. There was no wolves to attack it. Moreover, there were restrictions to hunt this animal. So they grew in large numbers. And this deer, what did they do? They were primary consumers. So they started eating a lot of the plants in the park. They started eating the grass and the young trees, all the fruit-bearing plants, everything. So this affected the other animals that depended on these plants. Because all these plants were being eaten up by the deer, there were no new trees or plants growing. And because new trees were not there, soil erosion happened. Again, because there were no trees, birds stopped coming there. And because of no trees, because of the decrease in plant life, water temperature increased. This affected the fish. So totally it affected many species in the forest. So after 70 years, the government decided to bring back wolves. So in 1995, 14 wolves were brought from Jasper National Park, Canada, and 17 more were brought later. So when these predators, when these tertiary consumers, the wolves, when they came back to the Yellowstone National Park ecosystem, the balance was restored. They started killing the deers, and as a result of the decrease in the number of deers, there was again the balance. The trees, plants started growing, birds came back, soil erosion stopped, temperature decreased, sea life was also reinstated. So this Yellowstone National Park is an example of Trophic Cascade. And through this poem, Dungy describes the changes that happened in Yellowstone Park after the reintroduction of wolves. Now we'll move on to the poem. Trophic Cascade by Camille T. Dungy. After the reintroduction of grey wolves to Yellowstone, and as anticipated, their culling of deer, trees grew beyond the deer stunt of the mid-century. In their upreach, songbirds nested, who scattered seed for underbrush, and in that cover warrened snowshoe hare. Weasel and watershrew returned, also vole. So came soon hawk and falcon, bald eagle, kestrel, and with them hawk shadow, falcon shadow. Eagle shade and kestrel shade haunted newly buried runnels, where deer no longer rummaged, cautious as they were now of being surprised by wolves. Berries brought bear, while undergrowth and willows, growing now right down to the river, brought beavers who dam. Muskrats came to the dams, and tadpoles came too, the night song of the fathers of tadpoles. With water striders, the dark grey American dipper bobbed in fresh pools of the river, and fish stayed, and the bear who fished also culled deer fawns, and to their kill scraps came vulture and coyote, long gone in the region until now. And their scattered seed and more trees, brush, and berries grew up along the river that had run straight and so flooded, but thus dammed, compelled to meander. is less prone to overrun. Don't you tell me this is not the same as my story? All this life born from one hungry animal, this whole new landscape. The course of the river changed, I know this. I reintroduced myself to myself, this time a mother, after which nothing was ever the same. Now let's look at it line by line. So, as we read, you should note down that there are a number of species that are referred to here. After the reintroduction of grey wolves to Yellowstone, and as anticipated, their culling of deer, trees grew beyond the deer stand of the mid-century. After the reintroduction of grey wolves to Yellowstone, that means the poet describes what happened to Yellowstone National Park after the reintroduction of these grey wolves. What were the changes? What were the transformation that happened in the ecosystem of that national park? So after the reintroduction of grey wolves to Yellowstone, what happened as anticipated? That means as predicted, അല്ലെങ്കിൽ പ്രതീക്ഷിച്ചതുപോലെ these wolves started culling of deer. Culling means killing. So the wolves started killing the deers. And when the number of deers decreased, what happened? Trees grew. Trees started growing beyond the deer stand of the mid-century. So earlier, during the mid-20th century, when the deer population was exploding beyond leaps and bounds, the tree population or the tree number of trees or the growth of trees was stunted. Means restricted. മുരടിച്ചു പോവുക. മരങ്ങളുടെ എല്ലാം വളർച്ച മുരടിച്ചു പോയിരുന്നു. Okay? But അതെല്ലാം മാറി when these wolves were reintroduced. In their upreach, songbirds nested, who scattered seed for underbrush, and in that cover warrened snowshoe hare. In their upreach, songbirds nested. That means at the tree tops, at the top branches of those trees, birds, singing birds, they built their nest. And when these birds that sat at the top of the trees, when they ate fruits, the seeds of these fruits fell down and it scattered. Okay, and it sprouted and new underbrush means new plants, bushes that were growing. So new plants and trees started growing, and the ground which was now covered with these underbrushes or bushes or short plants, what came? The snowshoe hare came, and they started making holes or warrens. Snowshoe hare is a type of rabbit found in places like North America, Canada, etc. And it has pink feet. Okay, next line. Weasel and water shrew returned, also wall, and so came soon hawk and falcon, bald eagle, kestrel, and with them hawk shadow, falcon shadow. See, you can see a lot of new names of animals and birds through these lines. So weasel are small carnivorous animals. Then water shrew and vole. Water shrew and vole look like rats. Okay, so they came back. Then what else? Hawk and falcon, bald eagle, kestrel. So this hawk, falcon, bald eagle, kestrel, all these are birds of prey. Okay, വേട്ടയാടുന്ന പക്ഷികളാണ്. And especially this bald eagle. Bald eagle is the national bird of the United States. And with them, hawk shadow and falcon shadow. So on the ground, we can see the shadow of these flying hawk and falcon always hovering in the sky. So earlier, before the coming of these wolves, all this were missing. But now, the ecosystem was reinstated. That food chain and food web came back to normal. Next line. Eagle shade and kestrel shade haunted newly buried runnels where deer no longer rummaged, cautious as they were now of being surprised by wolves. Eagle shade and kestrel shade haunted. That means the shadows of eagles and kestrels, they could be seen everywhere. So these lesser animals, they always have this haunting feeling that they might be attacked, They might be captured by the eagle or the kestrel or other birds or animals of prey. Earlier, all this was missing, okay, for some time. But now, the birds and animals of prey came back. So, we can see the shadows of eagles and kestrel all over there. And these shadows were like haunting the deers or those or other animals, because these are birds of prey, and now they can be seen all over the place. They can be seen near the newly buried runnels. Newly buried runnels means, the runnels means streams, short water bodies, streams, flowing water bodies. So and on the banks of these water bodies you can see berry trees. Okay, so now the deer no longer comes there, no longer rummage there. Rummage means wander there in search of grass, because they are cautious of being attacked by wolves. So because the deer does not come there, the trees are growing, the berry trees are growing, there are fruits in it, and other animals could have it. Okay, and next line, berries brought bear, while undergrowth and willows growing now right down to the river brought beavers who dam. So these berries attracted bear, while undergrowth and willows growing now right down to the river brought beavers who dam. And you can see a lot of undergrowth. Undergrowth means short plants, short shrubs, etc. And willows means long trees. These trees are used to make, for example, cricket bat or furniture. Okay, so the willow trees, the shrubs, everything is growing near those rivers, and this attracted beavers. Beavers are other species, other animals, and they are very famous for making dam. They make a dam like structure made of branches of trees and mud, and they stay there so that they can protect themselves from other enemies. Okay, next came muskrats. Muskrats came to the dams and tadpoles. So muskrats also look like rats, and they have a musky smell, a muddy smell. And then came tadpoles. Tadpoles are the young ones of frogs. So what you can see here is that when the ecosystem was reinstating its balance, all these species, they all are coming back to their position. They all have a function in this ecosystem. Okay, and they all have an equal role in maintaining this balance of the ecosystem, the balance of this food chain or food web, or whatever you call it. And we see that each and every one of these species, they have a role in it. They are very functional. They have their importance in it. If any one of them goes extinct, that will have a serious consequence in that ecosystem. So moving on to the next line, came to the night song of the fathers of tadpoles. And at night you can hear the songs of the fathers of tadpoles. Tadpole, as I said, it is the young one of a frog. So you can hear the sounds of the frogs at night. They all came back. Next you have a long line. With water striders, the dark grey American dipper bobbed in fresh pools of the water, and the fish stayed, and the bear who fished also culled deer fawns, and to their kill scraps came vulture and coyote, long gone in the region until now, and their scattered seed, and more trees, brush and berries grew up along the river that had run straight and so flooded, but thus dammed, compelled to meander, is less prone to overrun. Water strider is an insect that moves through the surface of water. We can see it in our rivers as well, in our water bodies or ponds as well. Then the dark grey American dipper, that is a bird, and it is an aquatic bird, and it catches its food from the underwater. It can swim and walk in water. So you can see these birds playing in the fresh pools of the river. They were swimming and walking and catching fish. And the fish stayed. That means there were a lot of fish in that rivers now, because everything came back. Nature was restoring. And not only the American dipper, but also the bear came to eat fish, came to kill these fish. And when the bear came to kill fish, it also killed the young ones of deer. മാൻ കുഞ്ഞുങ്ങളെയും ഈ ബെയർ എന്താണ് കൊന്നു, or made it their food. and to their kill scraps came vulture and coyote. അപ്പോൾ ഈ ബെയർ കഴിച്ചതിൻ്റെ, മാൻ കുഞ്ഞുങ്ങളെ കൊന്ന് കഴിച്ചതിൻ്റെ അവശിഷ്ടങ്ങൾ കഴിക്കാൻ, ടു ഈറ്റ് ദ റിമെയിൻസ്, ടു ഈറ്റ് ദ സ്ക്രാപ്സ് കെയിം ദ വൾച്ചർ ആൻഡ് ദി കൊയോട്ട്. Coyote is a wolf-like wild dog which we can find in North America. So all these vulture and coyote, they were long gone in the region until now. ഇവരൊക്കെ കുറേ നാളുകളായിട്ട് ആ സ്ഥലത്തേ ഇല്ലായിരുന്നു, ആ ഭാഗത്തേ കാണുവാനില്ലായിരുന്നു. But now they are all back. And their scattered seed and more trees, brush and berries grew up along the river. And from the droppings, from the excreta of these animals and birds, and these animals like coyote, they eat not only other animals but they also eat fruit. So from their excreta, these seeds get scattered all over and it sprout, and new bush, new trees, new plants grow up along the riverside. And this river, which had run straight and so flooded, but this dammed, compelled to meander, is less prone to overrun. So at a time when nature had lost its balance, even this river used to flood. It runs straight and it used to flood. But now, because the beavers have come, they have built dams, and the pathway of the river, it has changed. It has started to meander. It is not straight, but it has many twists and turns. The river has many branches. It flows to different places. And so this sort of redirection has helped in stopping those floods. So now it is less prone to flood, less prone to overrun. So here we can see that now the entire place, that entire ecosystem of Yellowstone National Park was filled with diverse flora and fauna. Okay, that diversity of nature is once again back. So this is the Trophic Cascade. If one part of the ecosystem changes, or if that chain of nature, that food chain, that food web, if any part of it breaks or alters, that will affect the balance of the whole system. Okay, and moving on to the conclusion. And in this conclusion part, the poet talks about herself. There is a comparison with nature and herself that she makes at this point. Don't you tell me this is not the same as my story? All this life born from one hungry animal, this whole new landscape, the course of the river changed. I know this. I reintroduced myself to myself, this time a mother, after which nothing was ever the same. So she's saying, don't you tell me this is not the same as my story. അതായത് നിങ്ങൾ എന്നോട് പറയരുത് ഇത് എൻ്റെ കഥയല്ല എന്ന്. That means she says this is her story. The story of the Yellowstone National Park is also like her own story, her personal life. So in Yellowstone, all this came back to normal because of the reintroduction of wolves. That's what she says. All this life born from one hungry animal, this whole new landscape, the course of the river changed. I know this. Okay, so we have seen through all these lines that after the reintroduction of grey wolves, what all changes happened. The trees started growing, the songbirds nested, there were the underbrush, there were the snowshoe hare, then the weasel and water shrew returned, then the birds of prey like hawk, falcon, bald eagle, kestrel, all of them came back. Then berries were sprouting, bear was coming, then the willow trees were growing back. You have beavers, muskrats, tadpoles, then water striders, American dippers, everything coming back. Okay, so all this came back just because of that one hungry animal, and that is the wolf. Okay, when they came back and when they controlled the population of the deer, all this happened. Even the course of the river changed. ആ ഒരു നദിയുടെ അതിൻ്റെ ആ ഒരു ഗതി തന്നെ മാറിപ്പോയി. So that course of the river can represent the course of our life as well. That is where she connects to her personal life. Then she says, I reintroduced myself to myself, this time a mother, after which nothing was ever the same. So we see some change happened in her personal life also. And what is that? She became a mother. അവരൊരു അമ്മയായി. And she reintroduced myself to myself. So it was a new me. Okay, the poet says, when I became a mother, I became a new me, a new version of myself. So I reintroduced myself to myself. And after I became a mother, nothing was ever the same. The whole course of my life changed. So, just like the reintroduction of grey wolves in Yellowstone National Park, it completely changed the ecosystem of that park. When the poet became a mother, that also altered the course of the life of the poet. Maybe she feels that before she became a mother, her life seemed very barren, very hopeless, very unbalanced. And now her life started flowering and she started experiencing new and beautiful experiences in her life. So that is the poem Trophic Cascade by Camille T. Dungy. Thank you.